welcome along. This is episode 68. Every time I say the number, I go, wow, I can't believe we've done this many episodes. I cannot believe people have been listening to us rattle on for this long.
Yeah, they may be listening. I don't know if they're listening anymore.
Who knows? But you know what? They're not listening to us anyway. They're waiting in anticipation for our wonderful guests.
Yeah.
So, and we've got one today. Miss Carrie Quigley is in the house with us. But before we get there, I got to tell you this really fun story. So, there's this West Texas gym called Rosa's Cafe. If you've never been,
you're going to find some way to put West Texas in every podcast.
Every episode. So anyway, it's a gym. Great spot. We took our college students there on Revive Retreat after we had an event, and then we went and ate there. And Blake, I kid you not, in Highland Village, Texas, I'm standing in the line waiting to pick up my wonderful Rosa's Mexican food. And this guy says, "Hey, are you the Fredonia Hill from Nacogdoches?" Yes, we are. It's written on the side of the bus, right? So he saw the bus. Yes, we are. And he introduced himself. Chris and his family, they introduced themselves and had some connection to SFA, have been to Fredonia Hill, and said how much they loved sweet tea and coffee.
We're famous.
And they love the history podcasts, and it was kind of cool to have a conversation with a friend of the pod all the way in Highland Village, Texas.
So we're regional now.
We're at least regional. That's good. So Chris, shout out to you and your family. Hope you're well. Thanks for saying hey at Rosa's.
Yeah.
So that's a good story.
It's a great story.
All right, we need to interview Carrie.
Yeah, we got things to do.
Okay, so as I said, this is episode 68. We've got Miss Carrie Quigley in the house with us today, and welcome along. We're glad you're here.
Thank you. It's great to be here. What fun.
Yeah, we're not sure whether or not you think this is going to be fun or whether we're a little bit crazy, but we're glad that you agreed to do it.
It's been some time since we've recorded one of these, so we may have more energy than what we should have.
That's right.
Hopefully it won't get out of hand.
Yeah, so we got to ask you the obligatory first question. This is a show called Sweet Tea and Coffee, not or. But when our guests come on the show, we typically say sweet tea or coffee.
I feel like this is just setting me up for failure every time, but yeah.
So where do you land on the sweet tea or coffee debate?
Or mostly coffee, but I'll drink both. Just depends on the kind of mood that I'm in, and so.
Okay, so do you have a coffee routine?
I do.
Okay, what's that look like?
It's coffee. Yes, I wake up and first thing I do is turn on my grinder, shut everybody's door, make sure I don't wake anybody up because it's kind of noisy.
Oh yeah.
Grind my own beans, turn on my little espresso machine.
Ooh.
Yeah, and I froth my milk, so all kinds of noise is going on in my kitchen.
Man.
But I got to do it, and I make myself my cup of coffee, and then I go outside on the patio and commune with the hummingbirds and the little critters that are waking up, and that's when I have my quiet time and do a little Duolingo, and then I do a little prayer time, and then I try to get some reading in, and it's just my time before everybody comes in.
Okay, so... where do y'all live?
We live out on the lake.
That's what I thought. Yeah, when I looked you up, I saw those addresses, Shoreline Drive. So my grandparents lived just down from there on West Wind Circle.
Yes.
And that's where I spent a lot of time growing up. So when you're describing your morning routine, I'm remembering growing up in that same kind of thing. And it's one of the most peaceful places
Beautiful sunrises.
Anywhere. Yeah.
That's amazing. And quite the cup of coffee you make for yourself.
It is. I only have one, so you gotta do it right.
Okay, yeah. See, I was with you at the grinder, and then fell off.
Yep.
So that's about as fancy as mine gets. Is that we grind our beans in the morning, but then we put it in the old Mr. Coffee, and it does its thing. There's no other real goodness.
Well, Mark, my husband, does not drink coffee, so this was actually a Valentine's Day gift for me about 5 years ago, and so it was a little bit of a splurge, but man, I'm hooked. I love it.
See, we got one of those for the classic wedding registry, and you go to Bed Bath & Beyond and you just scan everything. We were not big coffee drinkers, but we scanned one of those espresso machines and we got it and then had no idea what to do with it. And of course, when we first got married, we lived in this tiny little place and so there's no room really for it. And we got rid of it.
Oh, wow.
And as I've come to appreciate coffee more and more, it's like, no, why did we get rid of the espresso machine? So maybe I'll have to go down that road again.
Make a mean cup of coffee.
Oh man, that's so good. That's so good. Okay, so you have an interesting story in terms of location. You have been all over the place, all over the world, really, which is pretty cool. You grew up where?
I grew up in Colombia, South America, the coffee capital of the world, actually.
There you go.
Why I like coffee so
Maybe
much.
there it is.
There it is. Juan Valdez, who's not actually from Colombia. He's actually from Venezuela. But anyway, that's another podcast.
All right.
So I moved to Colombia when I was 6. My dad had a dream to buy a cattle ranch in South America. He had lived all over the world with his dad. My grandfather worked for the Department of Agriculture, and actually he went to different communities, Vietnam, Israel, Chile, just teaching people how to cultivate different types of agriculture. So my dad had a dream to buy some property, plant some grass for cows. And they really wanted to go to Chile in 1974, but that was not an option. The political system there was not good. So they ended up in Colombia, and they bought a 8,000-acre ranch in the plains of Colombia. And moved down there with my grandparents, and then my dad, and then my uncle was involved also. He actually still lives there, married a Colombian, and still lives there.
So the whole family gets on board to do this.
We packed up the whole family. We were living in New Jersey. My dad was working in New York City. He would take the subway in every day to 52nd Street. And he just came home and said, we're going to Colombia.
I mean, I would feel that way if I was in New York City too. But it is quite a shift to go from that type of urban area to...
Oh, my mother had never been out of Texas, really, when she went to, that was her first foreign assignment, was New Jersey, when and then he took her to Columbia. So that was always an interesting.
Okay, so I know you said you were 6 when that happened.
I was 6.
So I'm sure, your memory is of a 6-year-old of that, but that's a massive change for a family. And then the process of getting everybody on board. You said it was a dream. I mean, was this something that the family had been talking about for quite some time? We've got to do this, and it was just a matter of time finding the right thing?
I think my dad and my grandfather certainly did. My mother wasn't completely surprised. I always thought it was just like he came home one day and said, we're moving. And she said, oh, no, I knew when I met your father that was something that he wanted to do. And he had lived all over. And why they decided on grass and cattle, I don't know. I guess I should ask my dad that question. Yeah. But so it wasn't a huge surprise, but it was a huge shift. I mean, it was, and I remember there was a lot of culture shock, but really it was kind of the best thing really for our family. I think my parents will be the first ones to admit that had we stayed here in the U.S. on that track, our lives would have been totally different. So it's really. Yeah. It was really a good thing.
What do you remember about that transition? You mentioned culture shock, I'm sure as a 6-year-old.
Yeah, so we had running water on the ranch. So the ranch was far from the big city of Bogota, which is where my grandparents lived and where we ended up moving to Bogota later. But we were in the boonies. We had running water, but we did not have electricity for the first 2 years that we lived there. And I wasn't super happy about it. My television finally arrived. It took about 6 months for our stuff to come, and then I had nothing I couldn't turn my television on, right? I couldn't plug it in. So after finally 2 years, we got a generator. I could turn my TV on. I turned it on, and it was speaking Spanish, and I really panicked. I thought, what? Yeah, I was watching Sesame Street in English, and now it's in Spanish.
Did I get the wrong TV or what?
My TV. So I ran and I got my records out and I put them on, and I was convinced that they were going to speak Spanish too, but they didn't. I was so relieved that my records were at least still in English. But we had a lot of time as a family to bond, and we played games, and I spent a lot of time with my grandparents and my parents and my brother. I just have one brother, so it was transformative in that sense. Pretty strong family bonds.
Yeah. So were you, I mean, being out that far, were you homeschooled or did you go?
Yes.
How did that education part go?
My mother homeschooled. I was homeschooled 1st through 4th grade, and then my brother did 5th through 8th grade. And so when it was time for my brother to go to high school, they decided to move to the city, and we moved to Bogota. And my brother did high school there, and I started 5th grade.
So was that another culture shock moment? I mean, to go from being in such a rural, more isolated environment to bigger city, was that?
Not too much, because we would go to the city about once a month, I guess. We would travel up to Bogota and stay with my grandparents and go to church. We attended Union Church there, so it was an easier transition. It was different going into school because I spoke Spanish, but I had no idea how to read or write it because I'd been immersed in it and I was fluent.
Right.
And so they threw me in with all these Spanish-speaking kids, and I came home the first day of school in tears because I had no idea how to read or write Spanish. So that was an interesting transition. So they put me in the first level 1 Spanish. It's like, her Spanish is great, perfect, but she needs to learn how to read and write it. So that was
wow. So that was when you were in the 5th grade.
5th grade.
Okay. So how long does it take that's an interesting way to acquire a language, to not do all of those at the same time.
Right.
How long does it, when you already know Spanish, but then you're just learning to read and write, is it faster? Is it easier? What's the...
It took me, I finally did when I was in high school, I did take it with Spanish speakers, but I was in the low level, how you've always got your levels in school, right?
Yeah.
So I was in the lowest level with Spanish speakers, but I never achieved that high Spanish speaker level, but got a whole bunch of hours for college, took the AP test, and was able to place out of a lot of language. And so I ended up majoring in communications at the University of Texas, and I was able to graduate a little bit early because I had all those hours in Spanish. And then I ultimately went in and used my Spanish for a little while.
Yeah.
And I try to hang on to it and find different ways to use it.
Yeah.
But I've had to use Duolingo, I'm not going to lie, because there's just not a whole lot of opportunity to converse with people in Spanish.
Yeah,
here,
well, that's funny you say that because so that's
right.
My introduction to you. I hadn't actually met you in person, but my wife came home, I think she would have met you in a Sunday school class, maybe would have been the first time y'all met, or maybe it was the community sports camp. And she was so fired up because she met somebody that spoke Spanish and had a similar story, and she loves Spanish, and so that was the first thing that I heard about you. It's like, you got to meet Carrie Quigley. She speaks Spanish, so she was really excited to have somebody that could share that with her. So that's cool. Okay, so you mentioned going to the University of Texas, and I'm not going to hold that against you yet, but did you go straight from Columbia to Austin?
Yes.
I mean, was that so? You did the entirety of.
I graduated from high school.
You grew up there. Okay.
I did. I grew up there, and then my brother was at the University of Texas. I almost went to Tech. Actually, it was very close.
Man, you dodged a bullet there.
I did.
I'm curious. What was the deciding factor?
I guess I'll be totally honest.
Okay,
it was a boy.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. This is. Hey, you can share it all.
Right? I know, right?
It's kind of stuff we live for here on the Sweet Tea Talk.
Right.
So, but it was actually to get away from a boy.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Right. So
Okay.
I was going to Tech. I did a short 6-week exchange program with my cousin who lives near Amarillo in Groover, Texas.
Yeah, I have some. She'll never listen to this, but Amy Watley. I went to school with Amy Watley. She's from Groover. Shout out to Amy.
No kidding. Well, my cousin probably knows her. I'll tell her to listen.
I guarantee you in Groover.
Yes.
They know, I guarantee it.
So I had a 6-week. I spent 6 weeks there, and then my cousin came and spent 6 weeks in Columbia with me, which was fantastic for her. And we just saw each other a couple months ago. So, but anyway, I really liked West Texas, or the Panhandle, and
see, Blake.
I did.
Some people do.
It's nice for a short period of time.
It was a little cold and windy.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was a little bit of a shock, but I met some really great people, and they were all going to Tech. So I thought, well, I guess that's where I'm going to go to school. And I was dating this guy, and Then I went back home and finished out my senior year. And I don't know, I was telling the story just the other day to my parents. I just had a change of heart. And so back in the day, so this is Easter. I remember it was Easter weekend. And I don't know. I said, I think I really don't want to go to Lubbock. I think I want to go to Austin. My brother's there. So I had to write the university because I couldn't call them because I was in South America. So I wrote them a letter and said, hey, I've been accepted to Tech, and here are all my scores, but I really want to go to Austin. My brother's there, and by the way, I want in-state tuition too, right? So, yeah, okay.
What?
Yes, isn't that crazy?
That is
crazy. You could never get away with that.
Oh, no way, yeah.
So, yes, no questions asked. Your brother's here, sure, come on, all right, and thank goodness I did, because that's where I met Mark Quigley. So.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, I want to pause there because I want to pick up there. It's a huge, obviously, inflection point in your story is your time in Austin at UT. But tell a little bit about, we've just covered all of, aside from college, all of your real formational years. Tell a little bit about your faith journey in those years. Was your family a Christian family? When did you come to know the Lord? How did that unfold in your younger years?
We were members. My grandparents were members, and then our family of Union Church in Bogota. So this was a Christian-based church. We had a Mennonite preacher. We had Catholics. It was, if you were a Christian, this is where you went to church. If you spoke English and were a Christian, this is where you went to church.
Interesting.
And I attended Sunday school, we did VBS, and we were very involved as you could be living.
Right.
It was kind of back and forth. But when we moved to Bogota, we were very involved, and also we had some very good friends who were missionaries and who actually started a church in Bogota there. And we would do Bible study and youth group, and I would come back to Texas for the summers, and I would do church camp with my cousins. So I was very, very fortunate to be surrounded by supportive and positive adult influences in my life that really kind of lived out the teachings of Jesus. So and I was baptized when I was 6. I asked my parents to be baptized, and I remember I was baptized at Union Church.
So that would have been right after y'all moved.
Right after we moved.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I just really can't remember a time where I didn't know about the Lord, and then when I went to college, I did shop around a little bit, but never really found a church home in school. It was a little harder. And it wasn't until we got married, and then we moved to San Antonio, and we started to settle down, that Mark and I decided to look for a church. And really more kind of we didn't have kids yet, but we wanted a community for our kids to grow and to know Christ. So that's really and now God has that's kind of how he's been leading us around to the different churches, was through our kids.
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, so so you guys met at UT. Was that early on, like right when you first got there? How did you guys meet? What's that story?
We both had been there a year. He was a transfer. He's from Mississippi, so he's 7 of 7. So by the time he went to college, Mom and Dad were kind of done. So he was working his way through school, and he was doing a co-op program. He would go to school for a semester, and then he would work for a semester. So actually, I had finished my freshman year, and he had just finished his first year, which was a semester of school, and then a semester he was doing a co-op program with General Dynamics in Fort Worth. And I had just moved into my first apartment, and I had met my neighbor a couple nights before because I had locked myself out of my apartment.
It's a good way to meet a neighbor.
Right, and it's August, and I couldn't stay with her, though, because her air conditioner was out. But that's how we met, and anyway, long story short, her air conditioner is out, Claire, my neighbor, And I am in my apartment. My roommate has not arrived yet, and I was right in the middle of rush, and I was getting ready to go to a sorority function, and I walk outside. It's August 26th in Austin. It's hot.
Yeah.
And Mark Quigley is sitting on the porch because he knows Claire. He is friends with Claire. They are in town setting up a business, again, because Mark has got to work his way through school. Mm-hmm. But he knows Claire, but they're outside because Claire's air conditioner's broken. So that is how I met him.
Wow.
And we just kind of hit it off from there and ran into each other on campus and ended up getting married 3 years later.
Wow. And the rest is history,
as they say. The rest is history.
That's really cool. So throughout y'all's relationship, did he continue to have to do school and then
he did
be gone for a time? And
yes.
Interesting. That's a kind of a challenge in a relationship to do the distance. Now, where was he has kind of a I think I'm putting the pieces together right. If I remember, he has kind of an interesting background in terms of church. Grew up Catholic, maybe?
Yes.
Or so how did, as you guys meet and start to get serious, I know you said that finding a church was tricky for you. I had the same experience in college. That was a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm always amazed with our students here when they're able to
get
plugged in and belong here. Just go, man, that's so great for you. But how did that part go? Just kind of navigating each other's backgrounds and continuing to form in your faith and following Jesus and in the context of the relationship.
Right. He's Catholic. He was raised Catholic.
Yeah.
His parents were, I believe is Protestant, but they went to Catholic school because of there were 7 kids, and it was that they wanted their kids to get that foundation through school. So he ended up going to Catholic school. So when we started talking about marriage, we just started visiting different churches. We didn't, and I grew up with, Mennonite preachers and Catholics.
You already had a diverse group of people that you were going to church
we
with.
Had so many choices here for Christianity. So
interesting.
And now in hindsight, it would be fun to go back to Columbia and kind of just to listen to that church and their history and their doctrines and everything. But that's a side note. But we ended up on a Presbyterian church. We met George Cladis, who married us, and we just really liked the Presbyterian feel.
Yeah.
It seemed to be a good mix for both of us. But finding new churches is always a challenge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it
absolutely.
is.
Yeah.
And we ended up getting married in a Presbyterian church. And then when we moved to San Antonio, I had a great aunt and uncle who were members of a Presbyterian church. So it just made sense. They had great kid programs, and it was very family oriented. And that's really, that's kind of what drew us. It was church for us too, but we knew that we wanted a church home, an established church home for when we started to have kids, because it had been a big part of my life.
Yeah.
And Mark's as well. He got it every day. In school. So
now, as I understand, at some point, I guess it's in San Antonio with that church in San Antonio, you guys end up either starting or connecting to some sort of small group was it a home group? But it becomes a fairly important part of your life and formation. How did that?
Actually, it wasn't until we moved to Houston that our small group was really the one. So, but we did belong to a small group, and our big connection in San Antonio was Mo Ranch. We did the family retreats every year, every summer on Father's Day, and it was just a great and special time for all of us, for my kids and for Mark and I. They were very good about. They had things for parents. They had things for the little kids. They would, by age group, they would minister to all the different age groups. So it was just a really special time. We made some great friends in San Antonio, but it wasn't until we moved to Houston. And when we moved to Houston, our oldest daughter, Shay, was going into the 8th grade.
Okay.
And then our oldest son, Nick, was going into the 5th grade. And then our youngest, Miles, was 4, so he was still in pre-K. So he was just like a little rubber ball and bounced kind of wherever.
Yeah, just wherever, yeah.
But it was really tough.
Yeah.
On Shay and Nick. And so when Shay came to me, actually, she's getting ready to start 8th grade in a brand new school. She's left everything she's ever known in San Antonio. They were born, raised, church, everything, left everything. She came and she said, what am I going to do if I don't have somebody to eat lunch with me on the first day of school? And, that just brings you to your knees. And I just told her, I said, we're going to pray about it. This is something you're going to pray about. We're going to pray about it. And I don't know, but it's going to be okay. And sure enough, first day of school comes and off she goes. And she comes home and, Mom, guess what? I've met a new friend. I got to eat lunch with somebody. Fast forward to Friday. This is Monday. This is, am I going to have somebody to eat lunch with on Monday? To Friday, she brings home an invitation to go to a slumber party. Okay. I've just moved to Houston. She doesn't even have a cell phone, right? So there's no way to communicate with my daughter if I send her off to this. Oh. You're going to go spend the night with these parents. You're going to go into Houston. I really want to go. Okay. So I'm back down on my knees again, right? So I take her to this party and I go to drop her off. And I have to give these people my phone number because I don't have any way to contact my daughter. She doesn't have a cell phone. These people don't know me from Adam. I don't know anybody. So I have my name and phone number written down on a piece of paper. The mother answers the door. And I just start laughing because she happens to be a preacher at Clear Lake Presbyterian Church that I had visited 2 or 3 weeks before.
And you recognized her?
I recognized her. And I said,
gosh.
You have no idea who I am, but I know exactly who you are. And I'm so glad it's you.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
So it's just God's way of telling me, I've got this.
Wow.
I've got this. And she ended up being great friends with Lee. And then Mark and I were visiting another church. We were really enjoying another church at the time. And then our son, Nick, had joined a Cub Scout group. And in 5th grade, you move from Cub Scouts to Boy Scouts. Yeah. And the Boy Scout troop that he chose their host church happened to be Clear Lake Presbyterian Church.
Wow.
And we had heard of Clear Lake Presbyterian Church. That's why I visited it. I was the only one that went. I can't remember why the family wasn't with me. They were out of town, but there was a lot happening when we moved to Houston. But I had already been there because I had heard of the connection through our church in San Antonio. So here we go. Nick's going to be at Clear Lake Presbyterian Church. And then for Shay, our daughter's in 8th grade. 8th grade is a confirmation year in the Presbyterian Church where you confirm your baptism, and it's a big deal. It's a year-long program. Well, she's missing it because we've just moved and we don't have a church. Yeah. I get a call from this Katie, who has the mother of her good friend, who opened the door and said, if Shay would like to join our confirmation class, we've got a spot for her. And this is probably April, and confirmation's over in May. And why it took so long from September to April for us to figure this all out, God only knows. But Mark and I just kind of looked at Mark and I said, I think our kids would really like us to go to Clear Lake Presbyterian Church. And so we switched gears and ended up joining Clear Lake Presbyterian Church, and that's where we got involved in our small group. Because of our kids and the parents, their friends, one of their parents called us and said, hey, we're starting a group and we'd like you guys to participate. And then one of Nick's friends from Boy Scouts, their parents were in the group. So it was through our kids that we've, again, made a connection with the church. So it's kind of funny.
Yeah, that's amazing.
God works that way.
That's amazing. Well, I'm curious your perspective on something because some of your story resonates with my experience. My family moved from small town of Midland to Dallas-Fort Worth when I was in the 8th grade. And it was really, really, really hard. And it kind of took me from, and I don't know your daughter's experience, but I, at the time, I obviously would have called myself a Christian. I prayed to receive Christ when I was 6, but grew up in a very insulated small town environment. And then when we moved, it just threw a wrench in everything. And it really sent me spiraling. And I had a tough time connecting with community and with a church. And looking back on that as a parent now, I think, man, how hard must that have been for my parents? You know, they're watching me struggle, knowing that this move is kind of the thing, that this catalyst event in that struggle, and they're watching me struggle in my faith, like some of the most important, elements of my life, obviously. Talk to us about the parent side of that, where it sounds like what you're having to do there. And as I think about my story, what I imagine my parents going through was you're really having to trust God with your kid's journey and with your kid's faith. Yep. And as a parent now, it's like, man, I have to remind myself all the time, like, your job is not to just be in control. Control is
right. No, you're not.
And so what's that like as a parent when you're off in the unknown and you're having to entrust the process of your kid's formation in the Lord to Him?
You just have to be patient, and it's slow, and it takes a while. You can't really force. You think you're going down this path, and you just have to listen to those nudges from God, and to get you going to the right place. And I think you just have to take it day by day, and you have to be flexible and patient. A lot of prayer, and then I think you just have to rejoice and find joy in the small things when you're doing big changes like that. It's like little baby steps. You have to rejoice in the baby steps, the wins, and not think about everything that you've left behind, or they do this different, or you just have to rejoice in what's positive, and really meditate on those things, and enjoy those moments too, and celebrate them. And celebrate the small wins. But it is hard. Moving's hard, and finding a new church is hard.
What about on the days where your kids are struggling? What about, you took us into one. What if no one sits by me?
Yes.
How did that form your faith and your relationship with the Lord as you had to trust Him in those hard days for your kids?
It's just the answers that He gave me. He just shouted an answer to me. When I opened that door, when that door was open to me, and there's Katie, I knew everything was going to be okay. And, yeah.
That's amazing. You think about those hard days and how hard they are for the kid, but then again, as a parent, I'm like, man, how gut wrenching is that?
And just a lot of prayer, and I encourage my kids to pray.
That's neat.
One time my daughter Shay she did basketball, she ran cross country, she was a great student. She could pack 28 hours in a 24-hour day. That's just how she is. And one morning she came downstairs and she was in tears, and she said, I fell asleep studying and I don't know what I'm going to do. I've got a test. And I said, well, sweetie, it is 5:45 in the morning. The only thing we can do right now is just pray. And wouldn't you know, there was a fire drill during that class. So she came home that afternoon and said, guess what?
Gosh.
It worked.
Now, did you have to say, now hang on, this is not a strategy for further use?
Right. No, this is all God. And you just,
That's right.
That's right. You don't have, so it was great. She said it worked. And I said, see,
wow.
So I'm a big believer in just kind of breaking your day down. And I do a lot of breath prayers, just one step at a time. I just pray about, one thing at a time. And sometimes it's a whole gamut of things that I pray about during the day. But sometimes I can just meditate on one thing. But I am a big breath prayer just all day. I don't sit still very long, very often. I'm not I fall asleep during movies. And I'm always I've got to be doing something. I can't just sit. Like even at my job, I have to get up and walk around and stretch and I just don't like to sit very much. So I don't sit and have a big, long prayer time during the day. I'm a lot more of a breath prayer kind of person, but it goes on all day, all night. If I wake up, can't sleep, it's breath prayer. So just do a lot of praying, but it's kind of all day long, all night long. So
there are people that have had. So let me start over. Try to
rewind
again. Yeah. I think people probably have one or two reactions to that comment. One is the gasp, like you mean your prayer is not one classic quiet time that we always, put forward. Like that's the only way to talk to God. And then number two, there's people that are just like you, that have never felt like their prayer life could look like that. They've always thought it had to be in the box of this neat and tidy time in the morning, these set aside. I think when we imagine, I talked about this with college students the other day, when we imagine prayer, we often imagine it in this very quiet, isolated space. We don't imagine much movement. We are sitting still or whatever. Our eyes are closed, and there's some people that just in the description of that just go, okay, well then I could never pray. That's not me. I could never pray. And so we did this prayer practice where we were walking around and moving and just, we can do. I love hearing you describe breath prayer. And did you ever, well, let me back up. Let me ask you this. When did you realize you could pray that way? And when did you kind of start to embrace that sort of prayer life as part of your journey?
It was at a women's retreat, actually, I believe, where the speaker talked about a breath prayer. And she said, I just encourage you to find your own breath prayer. And she shared some of hers. So
now, for people that may not be familiar, describe what is that? What do you mean by that?
On the intake, you name God, like Heavenly Father or Holy One, and then on the exhale, so that's on the inhale, is you address God in any way you want. And then you exhale, you breathe out your request or your praise, or it's
just whatever it is in that moment.
Yes.
You're just surrendering that moment to the
Correct.
Lord with whatever it is.
And the one I use a lot is Heavenly Father, just keep me whole. I think sometimes, right? It's just sometimes I don't really know what I need, but I'm not. I just need to be whole.
Yeah.
So that's when I pray a lot.
So how did that? I mean, you learned that at a women's retreat.
I did.
Did you immediately start to apply that? How did that change your prayer life?
Yes. It just made it more accessible, I think, right? So just kind of brings God into almost every aspect of your life.
Yeah.
So
that's amazing. And so you've been practicing that now for years.
Mm-hmm. Long time. I've
That's
always
amazing.
been a big believer in prayer and answered prayer. And we've had a few instances in our life where prayers, you see the answer, and it's pretty profound. And our kids got to experience some of that too. So, but my kids will call and they're like, I have a flat tire. I'm going to be late to work. And I'm like, well, that's okay. Just God didn't want you on the highway right now. Just relax, take a breath, and it's okay. It's God's time. He wants you in that tire place and not out on the road. So it's okay. It's all going to be okay.
I love how you said it helps you, and I'm not obviously quoting you, but just it helps you stay connected to God in whatever moment that you're in. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes with prayer, we think, okay, prayer is the time where I've got to get this whole list of like the whole day or all of my worries or all of my fears or all these choices that I have to make. And God needs to know all of this kind of all in one package deal.
Right.
But really what you're saying is that prayer is so much more vibrant than that. It's a moment by moment opportunity to interact with God in literally the moments that are as small as my breath in and out, which we do thousands and thousands of times a day.
And they're not all requests. A lot of them are just praises too. Just, thank you.
Yeah.
I pray a lot during the day.
That's so good. That's so good. I think prayer is one of the most intimidating things that, as pastors certainly have lots of conversations with people about prayer, and intimidation is the word I think I would use to describe the way that I feel like a lot of people approach prayer. It's like, I don't know how to do that. I don't know.
Right.
It seems like a mountain I can't climb. And so I don't know. I love how you put it. You've made it, the way you've described it, just so accessible that we can, and I think that's God's heart, is to converse with us and be with us.
If you ask me to pray like in a group, no, it's not. It'll be really short.
Yeah.
It'll be in and out.
Yeah.
So no, I'm more of a.
That would be great. You ought to try that next time in like a Sunday school class where somebody asks you to pray. Just do one of those breath prayers.
Do my breath prayers. See what happens.
See what happens in the room. Yeah. So okay. So
funny.
take me into this small group. You said that was a dynamic part of y'all's life. Obviously, the Lord arranged that, and there were different connections and people. Why was that an important piece of y'all's journey and formation?
I think because it encompassed the whole family. It really just started through Mark and I, and then we started incorporating our kids, and we would have events, we would have meals, and it just formed some friendships and some bonds, even for my kids. So it was kind of a thing that we did. It started out really just me and Mark, and then we kind of drew the kids in. All of us did. And for us, that was, I have my 2 older kids, and then there's a big gap, and then we had Miles. So we were able to find some other families that have that same exact gap, and those kids became friends, and we just had some real lasting friendships, and we just did life together. It was during our when our kids were growing up, and struggles, and it was just nice. We met every Sunday afternoon, and then we would meet for dinner. We would have a meal. So, we would take breaks and stuff, but we were pretty committed to it.
Was it the same group of people kind of through that whole time?
No, it morphed and changed, and but there were some core members, I guess.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And some people aged out, and then some people moved, but it was always very small. It wasn't, I think, 6 or 8 people, I think, was the max. And we would meet in everybody's home, and we would rotate, and then you would do dinner, but it didn't have to be anything fancy, just literally, whatever you wanted to cook for a big group. So it was really special time. It was a special time for our kids too.
But the point was you were forming friendship. I mean, you used that word. You described it as friendship. This wasn't just a church program,
right,
that you were doing.
No, it was
friendship.
Friends that we've now moved away, but we see them and we stay connected with them, and even my kids stay connected to their friends that they met through our small group. So it definitely was a good time, and to share life with other people and our kids.
Yeah.
And it was ultimately, it's just our kids doing, I feel like. It was just kind of our kids that have led us to these different places. And really, I think there is a certain draw to Fredonia Hill too, through Miles.
Yeah.
My youngest.
Yeah.
He got plugged into sports camp, and
Right.
he moved. So we moved him away from home when he graduated from high school. So we kind of took out all of his high school buddies, which you kind of move away from them anyway, naturally. But when it first happened, it was not great. So he didn't have a friend base here in Nacogdoches. And Mark and I had been coming here, and we really liked the feel here. It's just so obvious that you love your members and you love your neighbors. And we really felt like we fit in, and we've been coming here for about a year. But this summer, Miles came home and stayed with us, and I said, "Hey, they're having this sports camp.
Yep.
And there's a basketball portion, so why don't you volunteer?" And he goes, "Okay, all right, I'll do it." Well, wouldn't you know, who's leading the basketball but John James, who's a university pastor here, and he scooped Miles right up and plugged him in, and what a blessing.
Yeah, and Miles did everything with us this summer.
He did.
Involved
He
in everything.
Oh, he loves it. And so I looked at Mark and I said, "We better take that new member class. And I think this is where Miles wants us to go to church."
That's great. That's funny how
yes.
Whatever's happened with the kids has been
That's kind of been,
part.
God's smart. He knows the way right to my heart.
Now Miles is at Baylor, right?
Yes.
Okay, I was gonna say, we were sad to see him go back to Waco.
Oh, that's sweet. He's a lot of fun. So he loved it here. He really did. He enjoyed it.
That's so great.
John was great. It was a great influence.
Yeah,
and I think they'll help him get connected too in Waco. when he was with us when we were visiting churches, and I remember one time we were getting ready to go into church, and he goes, "Oh, I don't like this. This is just the worst, visiting a church." He said, "It's just no fun." And I was like, "No, it's not."
I was going to say, let's just be honest about that. Yeah, that's it's not.
I mean, he'll say anything. Miles he is not afraid to, whatever he's thinking comes out of his mouth. And I was like, well, you're right. You're right, buddy, but it's okay. Well, it'll be okay. Yeah. And sure enough, it led us here. So, well, it didn't lead us here, but I think it certainly grounded us here. So we're here. You're stuck with us now.
That's right. So. We love it. Absolutely love it. Well, one of the things we like to do in these interviews is just kind of take something that has really stood out and bring it back at the end. And man, I just really struck by the conversation on prayer and your journey with your kids and the different transitions. What would you say to a parent that comes to you in a hard season in their kid's life? Maybe that's because of transition. Maybe it's for other reasons. There's all sorts of reasons where there's that struggle that kind of shows up in unexpected ways and places. And they're just going, I don't know how to fix it. I can't fix it for them. I'm sure it's just such a challenge in parenting. But how do I do this? Like, how do I walk them through it? How do I love them in the middle of it? What is my relationship with God supposed to look like in this? How would you encourage that parent? Because that scenario happens all the time. And I'm just curious how you would.
I think the first really important thing is to understand is the difference between what your child is going through and what you as a parent are going through. Like, how is your child really? Are they okay? Are they not okay? But sometimes they're okay, and you're still perseverating on something that happened, and you think they're not okay, but they're okay.
Wow, yeah.
So that's the first thing I would say is you just need to take a really hard look. It's like, is your kid really not okay? Then maybe you need to step in and intervene. But if you're just not okay with the situation, but they're fine, you might just let it play out and leave it alone and trust God. Pray about it. Wow. That's, I think, the first step. Yeah. And then secondly, I think just friendships or just relationships. Relationships are so important. And I think in providing those environments for your kids to make those relationships, like Fredonia Hill, I mean, we kind of came here and it was an environment for Miles to thrive. And I think sometimes you have to create those environments for them. And we host a lot of things too. A lot of times we'll have people over. We would kind of do that sometimes for our kids. We would host like the youth groups at our house and stuff. So as a way to, and sometimes we would go upstairs and the youth group would still be watching a movie and be like, well, where's Nick? And, oh, he went to bed like 30 minutes ago. And it's like, oh, okay, but okay. I'm glad y'all are here.
Y'all are still here, comfortable in our home.
Right, yeah. Right. But I think just providing those opportunities. But I think the most important thing is really just finding out, is your kid okay? And sometimes that's really hard. Sometimes that's hard to, and they're good at masking things sometimes. But I think I think deep down And I think sometimes you just too have to step back and have faith as a parent. A lot of times relationships that my kids have had that we weren't crazy about, if you just kind of leave it alone and let them figure it out, it works its way out. I know, just have patience. I think you just have to be patient.
Yeah, that's a really good word.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a really hard
It's really hard,
to
walk out. Yep.
That's
amazing.
Hard. Man, Carrie, you've certainly encouraged me.
Awesome.
Man,
sure.
That is so good, so helpful. I love too the encouragement that sometimes, helping our kids is us actually taking the step and the initiative in relationships and friendships, creating space for them to watch us engage in friendship. You're talking about your small group kind of being that. I think sometimes we get in a box where we don't go out and pursue those relationships and friendships. And sometimes that's actually what our kids need to see and be brought into to open up some of those channels of communication and opportunity for them. So I think that's really good. Well, I can't believe it. All the way from Columbia
Yeah.
to Nacogdoches.
Right.
Covered some ground, some miles.
We covered some serious ground here. And then right here in the Sweet Tea and Coffee podcast. So it's been really, really good hearing some of your story, and thank you for sharing that with us.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So looking forward to it.
Hey, we want you to know, if you've listened to this, friends of the pod, we want to hear your feedback. So I know we've been out for a while, but we're back, and so you need to get back in the routine.
The email's still there. People can still email us.
Let's go. So let's remind them of the email, Blake.
In case you've forgotten, stc@fredoniahill.org. That's straight to my computer.
Straight to Blake's. If you want to be on Blake's computer, that's what you need to do. We seriously would love to hear, how have you been encouraged by what Carrie had to say? How does her journey, her story resonate with yours? We would love to hear that. Would love to hear your feedback from any of our episodes, but feel free to let us know just what you're thinking, and we look forward to introducing you to some more friends.
Got some more folks coming
up. So you guys have a great day. Adios.